there's this idea promoted by our pro-imperialist cultural hegemony that I think is pretty manipulative and dishonest, as all of the ideas that are part of our pro-imperialist cultural hegemony are. This is the idea that Zionism is necessary to prevent the horrors of Nazi Germany from repeating themselves. The idea that there has to be a Jewish ethno-state in order for the Jews to be insured against being targeted by a new version of Nazi Germany. I think this idea is pretty easy to repudiate. Firstly, many of the horrors of Nazi Germany are in fact being replicated by Israel itself, with Israel's displacement of the Palestinians, forcible relocations, erasure of Palestinian culture, or at least efforts to erase Palestinian culture, with Israel's indiscriminate killings of Palestinian civilians, with Israel's efforts to force Palestinians into deeply impoverished zones where their movements are deeply restricted, where they're deprived of rights to demonstration and free expression, where they're systematically deprived of food, water, medical care, and forced into these abysmal conditions where there's this war for colonial domination going on, waged by Israel and its imperialist puppeteer Washington, in order to erase this whole ethnic group and if not fully exterminate the Palestinians, at least delegitimize their culture in the minds of the world, like erase this whole ethnic identity for the purpose of the ethnic supremacy of this ruling caste within Israel, when it should really be called Palestine, and this is the truth that these kinds of pro-Zionist arguments always deliberately overlook. They act like their goal is to prevent genocide, when in order to supposedly try to prevent genocide, they're propping up a state that is actively waging a genocide. So what do they hope to do? Fight genocide by carrying out genocide? Secondly, if Israel were to be abolished, if the goal of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is carried out, and Palestine is decolonized, this would not result in a repeat of Nazi Germany. If anything, it would result in, if anything, for the Jews living within Israel, it would result in improved conditions for many of them, because what these kinds of pro-Zionist arguments also overlook is that the white Jews, like the light-skinned Jews who are associated with Europe in Israel, are the ones who get the most benefits from this settler colonial system. The darker-skinned Jews are oppressed by Zionism along with the Palestinians. Perhaps not to the same extent, but they are oppressed. They don't get the same benefits that are given to the lighter-skinned Jews by Israel's numerous discriminatory laws. And if the goal of decolonization of Palestine were to be carried out, all that would really happen, all that this would really mean, is the coming of true democracy within the land that's now called Israel, but it's rightfully called Palestine. If true democracy were to be implemented, if the Palestinians were given a right to return, if the Palestinians were given the same kind of say in the political process that the most privileged within Israel are now given, then this would open up that part of the world to a lot of benefits that to the masses that are not available to the masses there due to the nature of this settler colonial capitalist order that's been imposed by Euro-American imperialism. These are the realities that this manipulative Zionist arguing point that about how Israel is necessary to defend the Jews from genocide always overlooks. The Jewish settlers living there, who many of them are subjected to the inequities of capitalism, would likely be able to get a better standard of living under the kind of political system that would likely be implemented there if decolonization were to happen. Because if decolonization of Palestine were to happen, it would be a lot more likely that socialism, a socialist revolution, would become a lot more possible. And the equivalent is the case for the land now called the United States. If decolonization of the United States were to occur, the primary obstacle to Marxist development within U.S. borders and abroad, which is the imperialist U.S. government, would be destroyed, and socialist revolution would become a lot more easy. These post-colonial areas, whether in the United States or in Israel or in Canada or Australia, all of these other settler colonial states, if these states were abolished and decolonization were to happen throughout the whole world, not just Israel, the United States, but all these places where settler colonialism dominates, if settler colonialism were to be abolished, then socialism and all of its material benefits, workers' democracy, greater social services, greater power to the working class, would be given to the masses throughout these areas. These are the arguments that this historically myopic, deliberately misleading settler colonial argument when it comes to Israel overlooks.